Okay, so Ascend Alliance is where I work. We're based in Salt Lake City. Our mission is to empower those in need to save their children and ascend out of poverty. Do you like how we cleverly used the word ascend in the mission statement? I'm going to be honest, the mission statement isn't my favorite. I think it's a little vague. But hopefully, as we go through the next couple of minutes, you will, I'll explain a little better who we are and what we do. A little bit of our background. We were first organized in 1982 as the Andean Children's Foundation by Timothy Evans. Timothy Evans still serves on our board of directors. Tim Evans served a mission in Peru and came home, went on to be a dentist, but stayed in contact with a couple of the families that he worked with. And he found out that one of the families that he loved and that he worked with on his mission, their daughter, who was very young at the time, she was 3 or 4, had drinking water out of a puddle and consequently died out of a very simple thing. And Tim was so distraught and so upset over what had happened that he went on and decided that he needed to do something to change it. And that's where the Andean Children's Foundation began. Tim has roped in the help of a lot of people, and he's done a lot of things over the course of his life. And he actually roped his mission president into coming to work with us. And his mission president works with us now. And Tim served his mission in 1979. So that's a pretty impressive feat. And there are several other missionaries that served with Tim who work and who are on our board of directors. We were later reorganized as Chosky Humanitarian, and we worked as Chosky Humanitarian for a long time. That is when I jumped on the bandwagon. I've worked for Ascend for about 5 years, and I started when we were Chosky. And in 2005, we merged with the Engage Now Foundation, which was, Tim didn't think it was enough to organize one foundation, so he kept organizing new foundations, trying to get it just right. So this is another one that he had organized in like 1984. And now we're known as Ascend, a humanitarian alliance, and we are celebrating 26 years of service. Okay. We work in Ethiopia, Peru, Bolivia, and Ecuador. We have a couple of ties to Mozambique and Mexico, but these are our main focus areas. When we talk about internships, when we talk about doing expeditions, which are shorter trips, we go to those other places too, but this is where we do the majority of our work. Our focus are capacity building solutions in education, enterprise, health, simple technology, and construction. So now I'm going to go through and talk a little bit more about those. But first, does anyone have any questions? Okay, I have you stunned, I can see. So first, our main focus is education. And you're going to see as we talk about it that actually education is sort of the basis of all of the other programs too. And we recognize that when you talk about education and health, for instance, it's sometimes hard to separate those two. Because if you're teaching a class in hygiene, is that an education program or a health program? It really can count as both. So education, we try to make that the base of everything that we do. We use Pro-Literacy, which is a program, Literacy for Social Change. They have an organization. They do internships on campus. They're really fabulous. We focus on women and children. We do basic reading and writing as well. And here we have 2 pictures of Ecuador. The first is a group of men who are learning to read and write, and the second is a group of children who are learning to use computers in a school that we have built. Our next focus area is enterprise. And our main focus in this area is our Ascend Business Training. There is a program that we have been developing over the course of the last 10 years. We've done it in coordination with a lot of other people, with the Call to Serve Foundation, with Don Clark, with Joel Matz, and all of these other people have helped us create this program that is geared to helping small businesses in the developing world better their business. And it teaches really basic principles. If you saw it, you would sort of laugh at what it contains. But it contains things like you need to learn to keep a register of the things that you buy and sell. And you need to learn that family money and business money are 2 different things. So really, really simple principles. And we have it geared toward 2 sorts of classes of people. We have it geared, we have initially started doing it in an urban setting. So businesses that were fairly well established. And then we moved on to the informal rural business setting. And I'll tell you a story about how we moved on to that later when we talk about internships, because that actually, that growth and progress in the program was brought about by an intern, which we are very grateful for. And the top picture is a woman in Bolivia who has increased the profits of her business by 125%. She has decreased her family debt, she started savings, and she makes Barbie doll clothes. So she didn't make those Barbies that you see, but she knits and sews the clothes that they use. Another one of our enterprise initiatives is we work on animal loans. In Ethiopia, we do goat and sheep loans to orphans and widowed families. And in South America, we do guinea pig loans. Some of you may be thinking, why would you do guinea pig loans in South America? Guinea pig is a delicious treat in South American culture. So and they reproduce like guinea pigs. So it's actually a very good business for these people to be in. We also, for a little while, we started running our own microloan business. We found that we were not very good at that. Our staff, quite frankly, didn't have the mathematical training or capabilities to run a loan program. And so what we did is instead, we now partner with local banks to offer loans. In Bolivia, we have partnered with a local bank, and they give us an interest rate that is substantially less than what anyone else gets. And the people can also apply for microloans to do that. So that's sort of what our goal is. We do savings groups. We also teach basic mathematics and trade skills, like you can see at the bottom. That is a group of women in Ethiopia who are learning to sew with hand crank sewing machines, which is sort of tricky because you've got one hand cranking like this and one hand trying to sew. So it takes a little bit of getting used to, but it's been a very successful thing. We've also done training in things like beekeeping, and we've sort of tried some interesting things. We've failed a lot of times, but we've had some wild successes too. Oh, I may have gone too far. Okay, health. Our main focus in our health initiatives is to link with local infrastructure to provide medical care to those who would normally not get it. We accomplish this in a variety of ways, and it's something we've been working up to for the last 26 years that we've been working. We started out, Tim Evans is a dentist by trade, and so he started out by taking some of his dental friends down to Peru to work on all of these things that he was thinking about, and clean water for kids, and also he wanted to provide some dental care. And that expanded, and we actually have a lot of doctors who want to go to South America. They want to help local doctors, and they want to help people who don't normally have access to medical care. And so what we did is we started out by sending North American doctors down who would go into rural communities and would provide training and medical checkups. And then we decided that was not a very good idea because there was no one to do any follow-up and no one who could take care of these patients after the medical professionals left. So we decided to take down North American doctors who would partner with local doctors, go to rural villages or places where there was not health care, and provide health training and screenings. And we got so good at that, actually, I'm going to brag a little bit, that we now run an operation that doesn't require North American doctors to go down. In Cusco, Peru, a medical clinic bus that is donated to us by the government goes out every 2 weeks full of doctors, and our staff helps run a medical clinic that is run entirely by local doctors. So we're very proud of that, and that's happening in Mexico and Ecuador as well. We also do training for local medical professionals. Another major success that we had in Peru, it was a CME conference. CME stands for Continuing Medical Education. And every 2 years, doctors have to go to school to prove that they aren't losing touch with reality and that they're learning the newest sort of innovations that have happened. And we partnered with the University of Utah so that doctors who went with us to South America received CME credit, so they got credit for taking these classes. And then we partnered with the local health ministry, and they sent all of their local doctors, and their local doctors in this group training also got CME credit. So the Peruvians and the North Americans got CME credit for holding this conference where they did first aid training and emergency medicine. So we provide interchanges between local doctors and North American doctors. We teach a lot of sanitation and hygiene. As you can see right here is a young Peruvian trying to learn to wash her hands, looking a little bit terrified. We do nutrition classes, and we also do cooking classes. One of our new favorite initiatives happened in Bolivia, and I did not know this until very recently, that Bolivia is one of the largest exporters of soy in the entire world, which I had no idea of. And the people there do not eat soy at all because it's just not part of their traditional diet. And so one of our coordinators has decided that she is going, single-handedly, she is going to teach people how to use soy in traditional recipes so that they can have increased nutrition, because we work in populations that often don't have access to protein sources, and soy, it's so prevalent in Bolivia that it's literally rotting on the side of the streets, but these people are starving just because they don't know how to use it. So we do cooking classes as well. Our simple technology projects, we try to do simple technologies that are reproducible and that reinforce the trainings that we're doing on other projects. So if we teach nutrition classes, we also help communities build greenhouses and gardens so that they can provide the nutrition that they're learning about. If we're teaching health and sanitation classes, we'll help communities build latrines. Health and sanitation is actually also a stove and an oven. We build stoves that pipe smoke out of the house. We build community ovens that serve as enterprise projects. We also do large-scale projects in connection with local governments. We build schools and libraries, community bathrooms, community centers, and all of those kinds of big projects that you sometimes think about when you think of going to help in developing countries. So that sort of in a nutshell is what we do. Are there any questions about the kinds of projects or things that we're involved in? Yes?
Do you do all of these things in all of the countries?
We try. That's a great question. We try to tailor these activities so that they fit the communities where we work. So we don't do every program in every community, but we're open to doing every program in every community. And very often communities themselves will decide what they need. We hope that our staff in country are capable and they're listening to the needs of their communities. And recently the staff in Ecuador came to me and they said, Sallee, we have a little problem with alcoholics. And I said, okay, so what do you want to do? And they said, well, we've got this great plan. We want to be the AA administrator in the communities where we work because so many of the families are struggling with an alcoholic in the family. So in Ecuador, though it's not part of what we're doing in the other countries, we're running the AA program in the little cities where we work. So we do try to modify ourselves to what the needs of the communities are and what's culturally appropriate. Yeah?
Some questions. In the communities that you work in these countries, is it like one community? Are you widespread across the country? Is it just a couple communities here and there? And then the second question is, when you talk about staff, who is that? Is that full-time year-round staff? Is that local staff? Those
are great questions. Okay, and we're going to get to them. Perfect. The first question is that we work in, this is jargon again, so I'm going to have to explain it. We work in what we call clusters. In each of the countries where we work, we have 1 or 2 offices. We have 2 offices in Ecuador, one in Riobamba, one in Cuenca. We have 2 offices in Peru, one in Lima and one in Cusco, and we have 1 office in Santa Cruz, Bolivia. So that's where I'll start explaining, because it's a little more complex in Ethiopia. And we work in what we call a cluster of communities in each of those places, or several clusters of communities. We have found, we started out by working in any community that was in need, right? So, and Cusco was where our largest program was from the very beginning, so this is sort of where we learned some hard lessons. We started out in Cusco, and we found these really, really poor villages in the Sacred Valley, so we started working there. And the Sacred Valley is about an hour and a half away from Cusco. But then we found these really, really poor communities on the other side of Cusco, about an hour and a half the other direction. And then we found this really, really poor community that was in a third direction from Cusco. And so our staff were spending hours and hours every week traveling to these little communities that were all an hour and a half in different directions from Cusco. So we decided that we were going to organize ourselves a little bit better, and what we did is that instead of picking communities that are in different areas all over, we picked a couple of different areas, and we picked 10 to 15 communities in those little areas to work, right? So like in the Sacred Valley, there are 4 or 5 communities where we are still working. And so when the people go to the Sacred Valley, they have to visit all 5 of those communities where we're working. And when they go to a place called Santiago, which is on the other side, they have to visit all 5 of the little communities where we're working in there. And right now in Cusco, we're only working in those 2 areas. But as soon as the staff feel like they have it under control, and as soon as they find a place that they feel like is ready, then they pick another place where they want to start working. Does that make sense? And the next question I'm going to get to, because I actually have a slide prepared about that. I think it may be next. Well, okay, it's not next, but it's second to next. So we'll do this one first. How do we accomplish what we're trying to do? One of the major factors of what we do is we partner with local governments, other NGOs, and the communities with which we are working. The community has to contribute if we're going to help them. It can't be something that we're just giving to them. And this is one of my favorite examples right here. This is a library. Oh, so the community has to contribute a donation of unskilled labor and some other monetary donation or a donation of materials. Very often communities will donate sand for the making of cement, or they'll donate wood sticks that they can go and collect themselves. If they don't have money, they will donate some other form of material to build something. And so then we have partners and governmental matches and support. And this is the LaGuardia case study, and it's right here. This is a library that was built in Santa Cruz, Bolivia, in a place called LaGuardia. And LaGuardia is the big area, and the little tiny village where we're working is called Pedro San Lorenzo. And this project, with everything, it's a computer center, it's a library, there's a fence around it. It's about a $40,000 project, which is a lot of money to put into one little project. And so Luise, whom you can't really see, but he's right here. Luise is our manager in Bolivia, and he is hilarious. He is a wheeler and a dealer. And he really wanted to build this library, and he knew we didn't have $40,000 to contribute to it, but he knew we had $4,000 to contribute it. And Luise said, I am going to take care of this. I'm going to get it done. So he went to the local government on the municipality level, which would be like the county level. And he said, we want to build a library in Pedro San Lorenzo. The people really want it. What can you do? We want you to pay for 50% of it. And the government said, okay, we'll pay for 50% of it, and you guys pay for 50% of it. That still leaves us with $20,000 we have to pay for it, and we only have $4,000. So Luise says, all right, you write me a $20,000 check. And they did. Luise puts it into the bank account. He's halfway there. And you will see what a wheeler and a dealer he is. Then Luise thinks to himself, well, this is a $20,000 budget, but if I can get cement at 50% off, I'm going to save $5,000. He went to the cement company and said, we are trying to save children's lives here. Do you want to help? And the cement company did want to help. And so they gave him the $5,000 discount on the cement. And then he actually found another organization that was looking for a project, and it's an organization that Mike used to work for called AYS. And AYS sends high school students down to Bolivia and Peru to do manual labor for 2 to 3 weeks at a time. And Luise thought, this is a perfect fit. I've got extra manual labor, and AYS people are willing to pay for the materials that they use while they're working. So he got $20,000 from the government. He got $5,000 in cement. I don't remember exactly what he got from AYS, but he got a portion of it from AYS, and then he had $4,000 from us, and he was still about $1,000 short. And so he went to the community, and he said, I have raised $39,000 to get this library built. Can you please give me the other $1,000? And the community did. And so a $40,000 project got built for $4,000 of our contribution. And that's really what we try to do with money, especially because that means that we have invested individuals in all kinds of places. The people at AYS care what happens to this library. The mayor of the city who gave us $20,000, he came to visit us in Salt Lake City last month, just because he wanted to check in. He wanted to make sure that things were still going well, because he is a friend and he's a partner in this project. And that is what we try to do with all of our projects. We try to make them community projects so that everyone feels a part of it. This is one of our major strengths, and I love these people. My job, I coordinate internships with Ascend, but I also manage all of these offices. I'm in charge of coordinating that the work happens in all of the offices in South America. And this is our staff in Bolivia. There's one person who doesn't really fit in, and this is Michelle, who actually is a BYU student. So, but other than that, these are year-round, continually staffed offices. These are individuals they have jobs. They've worked for us for between 5 and 2 years, just this staff. Local employees, so they're all local people, and we have ongoing programs and projects that happen all the time. Okay. Then we have interns. We try to have 2 interns per office, and their tasks depend on the intern's skill and the needs of the office. That's Carly right there, and Carly is a phenomenal photographer. And this was not an official Ascend project, but Carly wanted to teach some of the locals about photography, and so she did. So we try to partner interns with what their skill set is. Fortunately, Carly not only is a great photographer, Carly knows all about QuickBooks and accounting. So Carly, in addition to doing all of the accounting of the office and helping get the office on track and teach the local people about using American forms of accounting, also taught photography, and she also taught nutrition classes and things like that, because that was what was interesting to her. These interns right here, Emily and Ashley, they were also in Ecuador, and they do a lot of paperwork too, as you can see. The staff actually aren't great typers. They have a hard time using computers, so the interns often get delegated projects that the staff don't want to do, which include filling out paperwork, making sure there are pictures taken of the projects that they've done, and those kinds of things. It's generally a 4-month commitment. We try to make it a fabulous cultural experience, and the majority of our interns who go get school credit. And this next picture I sort of included to sick you out, but also so that you would know that it is a real culture experience. This was the first picture that Carly sent me from her internship. And she said, "What am I doing here?" She had gone to the local market where they were selling chicken heads. Later she sent me one where she was asked to eat a chicken head, so her experience just got bigger and bigger. The next thing that we do in order to accomplish our tasks is we run expeditions. These are 5 to 10 day experiences with groups of between 15 and 30 North Americans. They either camp in the local village or they stay in a hotel that's close, depending on what the geographic situation is. And there generally is one large project and several small projects. So an AYS expedition went and helped build that. So there were like 35 teenagers who were there helping. And then several weeks later, a group of North Americans from our office went down and helped build it as well. Okay, so those are, before we move on to this slide, those are sort of the ways that we accomplish what we've set out to do. Are there any questions about any of those things? I hope there are questions about internships and people really want applications, because you can just email me and I'll send you an application. Yes?
One problem we have is the things we're able to do aren't necessarily the things the community needs the most.
Mm-hmm.
We can put up a water.
But they can do that too, and probably faster than we can.
Well, yeah. So how do you negotiate what you're able to do with your students or your money versus what local communities want?
That's a great question, and it's a question that we think about a lot, because I think it applies to how do we keep this also culturally appropriate and make sure that we're not implementing on these communities something that we feel like they need instead of something they feel like they need. And one of the ways that we overcome that is by having permanent local staff. Our staff get the volunteer time of trained professionals. We almost never pay for electrical work or for plumbing work or for skilled labor, because we get volunteers who are local volunteers who are competent in the local ways of doing things who come in, and then our people help those people. One of the things that we have also found that has helped us with these expeditions is that we assign teams. So let's say we have a group of 30 people, right? And we'll assign those people to each be on one of 5 teams. There's a technology team, an education team, an enterprise team, a health team, and then there's a cultural team. And the cultural team is the team that everybody wants to be on. And the cultural team is the team that's in charge of coming up with ways to relate to the community. And they're the ones who play with the kids all day long. Because I don't know if you have traveled outside of the United States, but in a lot of developing countries, kids just sort of come out of nowhere. So you show up in a small community and suddenly there are 400 kids standing around you wanting to play with you. And when their parents are worried about them, that means that their parents aren't able to work on the projects that they need to be working on. So we have a whole group of volunteers who are in charge of herding these kids and making sure that they have something to do so their parents can be off working. And so then what we try to do is have these skilled volunteers, like the electricians and the plumbers, working with a couple of people from the United States or from North America who are able to be apprentices of sorts to them. And then we also have this whole group of people who are working in this cultural playing setting. Does that make sense? And is that an answer to your question? I hope so. Okay, yeah.
I came in late. Does most of what you discussed about the internships in Ecuador and those other places, that also apply to the internships in Mozambique? Are you going to talk about that? Or is...
Yes, Mozambique is actually a place where we have a partner that we work with, and so the internships in Mozambique are a little bit different.
Okay.
We work really closely with an organization called Masamba, and we focus there on water and gardens. So the simple technology projects that you work on are mostly pumps and wells, and then you build gardens and greenhouses.
Okay, so there's not much of a business
No.
opportunity there?
Mm-mm. There was for a little while, because we were, in a sense there is. These gardens are actually set up to be small businesses. So the people do receive a little bit of business training, but it's sort of an on-site business training with their gardens. Okay. Yeah?
What you were just talking about, the different teams and everything, so does that only happen when people go on the expeditions? Like, that doesn't happen when you're working in the office?
No. Because, well, it sort of does when you're working in the office. Our staff are actually split up geographically normally instead of by suit. So let's go back here to this picture of the staff. Hold on one second. Okay, so this is the Bolivia staff, right? And this is John. And John is a business expert. And he works in the areas that are closest to the office. This is Brigham. Brigham is a technology expert, and he works in an area called LaGuardia, where they built the library. This is Carmen, and Carmen is our nutrition teacher, the one who loves soy. And she works in an area that's on the other side of town. So we have these 3 areas where we work in Bolivia. And Brigham is in charge of LaGuardia. He's in charge of everything that happens there. But Brigham doesn't know everything about business, and he doesn't know everything about nutrition. And so he often will ask John or Carmen to come with him where he's going and help him do the projects that he's trying to do. And then John and Carmen will do the same thing to Brigham. They're not very good at building latrines, so they'll ask Brigham to come and help them. Does that make sense? So we still have all of those areas where we're working, and there is sort of still a team atmosphere and an expert atmosphere, but the local staff just work within themselves to accomplish all of the different projects that we're working on.
So where do interns come in the picture? Like, what do they do?
It depends. It depends on what their skill set is, and it depends on where they're going. Because we are sending them as part of an office and an internship program, we remind them that they are interns and that they are going to work with people who are probably more skilled than they are in a lot of ways. And that they should be ready to be, subordinates isn't maybe the right word, but it kind of is. You're an intern. You're learning to do things. You're learning to work in an office, and you're learning how to do it in the developing world. You're going to have a lot of skills that they don't have. You're going to know everything about computers, and they will ask you to fix every computer problem they have, regardless of whether or not you know anything about computers. You're going to be able to type faster than they are. You're going to know a little bit about nutrition in a different way that they do. So Michelle worked with John because Michelle was really good at business and she wanted to work on the business training. So that was her main focus. Their manager at their office actually requires that they go out and work in the field 1 day a week. So most of the time Michelle was working in the office, going out and visiting the business students that she was working with, but 1 day a week she had to go build the trains because that was the rule in their office. Does that answer your question? Okay, so interns fit in doing all kinds of things. We tell our interns that one of the greatest personality traits they can have is flexibility, because you're just called on to do a lot of different things, and it's really a lot of fun, but sometimes it's not exactly what you were planning on. Okay, other questions?
Question, in terms of like working directly with the communities and like finding people to participate in a business thing, or finding out who in the community wants to do something, are your staff going out and talking to people and finding out what their issues are and their needs and their desires to make changes, or are the staff coming out and saying, hey, we've got a great this or that, who wants to do it? How do you do that relationship with them?
In theory, it is the former, and I think in practice it's very often the latter.
Of them going out and
Yeah,
saying,
yes,
we've got a great soy
yes,
product.
Exactly.
How do we do it?
So Joan brings up a really excellent question, and it's one we think about and talk about all the time. We want to make sure that we're providing what the community wants, not what we want the community to have. And so finding that out, our staff have an added advantage because they are local people. They know the people that they're working with. They work really closely with community governments. Because we've worked really hard for all of our projects to be 50% sponsored by the government, they're already working with the local infrastructure that's in place. We also have found that I don't care how, you could be 800 miles away from anywhere, and a little tiny village made up of 5 people will have elected a president, a vice president, and a secretary, and probably a treasurer. So even in these tiny communities where we work, the community has come up with their own form of government and their own form of authority. So we work really hard to work with the sort of on the village level government, and then also on the sort of county level of government. And so they're the ones who are helping us identify really needy families, identify the kind of projects that need to happen. And that probably is more realistically where we are, as opposed to working with individual community members and asking the community as a whole. Yes?
You said the structure in Ethiopia was somewhat different.
Yes.
How so?
The structure in Ethiopia is just a little more complex. Ethiopia is a country that, even in a non-famine year, does not produce enough food to feed its people. And thanks to really good people with really good hearts, and we are the world, we are the children, since the 1980s, Ethiopia has been truly dependent on aid from the Western world. I don't know if you guys are old enough to remember We Are the World, but I certainly do. All of the donations from that to that song from Michael Jackson, from everyone else, went directly to Ethiopia. And there were pictures of all over the news of starving babies with flies in their eyes right here. And the world sort of was up in arms about people dying of famine in Ethiopia, and so tons of people went to the rescue. The most prominent job source in Ethiopia is non-governmental work. So that's your biggest sector of the market. So that's why it's so complex there. It's harder to work with governments there. It's easier to partner with other nonprofit organizations because there are so many of them. So that's where a lot of our partnering comes from. But it's also a little bit different there because villages in South America are about 200 people. It's about what a typical rural village is. And in Ethiopia, it's about 10,000 people. And so you just change the scale. But it's 10,000 people in this area living in mud huts. So they're just as needy as the 200 people in Ecuador. You just have to have a little bit of a different infrastructure to deal with the size. Other questions? Okay, my last slide, which we'll get to now, was, go back. Things that we're thinking about, and things that where we know we need to improve, and we've tried a lot of things, and we're still trying to get our minds around it. The first one is accountability. And accountability comes on a lot of levels. We're a nonprofit organization. We run through donations from private donors. When someone gives us $100,000, what's the appropriate way to go back to them 6 months later and say, this is what you were able to accomplish. Thank you. So we think about that. How are we accountable to the people who help and donate to us? The second thing we think about, and I may have a hard time putting this into words, but I'm still going to try. And this has to do with accountability. It's very easy for us to ask the people who work for us, who came to work on time? How many hours did you guys work? How many bathrooms did you build? How many classes did you teach? But we are an organization that is interested in helping people become less poor, ascending out of poverty, in creating sustainable solutions. And how do you measure that? How do you measure, can you ask the question, so is this community more sustainable? Are people less poor? And the problem that we run into there is we ask all of these other questions. How many bathrooms did you build? What's the people's annual income? How is that changing? So those sort of statistical questions that we ask make our staff think that that is what we care about. So when we're constantly asking, how many latrines are you building? They are thinking, they want latrines, they want latrines, they want latrines. And we find that our staff sometimes loses focus because we're asking these questions, trying to get at this big sustainability question, because this is a question that we still don't know how to ask. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's one of the accountability things we look at. Curriculum. This is a big one that I have been thinking about a lot. We provide training in health, we provide training in nutrition, we provide training in business and enterprise and reading and writing and basic mathematical skills. How do we know that we are providing what the community needs and that we are helping the community progress and not just teaching them the alphabet over and over and over again? How do we measure where a community needs to start? How do we measure when someone's graduated? So sort of this in the informal setting, how do you measure and how do you gauge curriculum? And what's culturally appropriate? And what's already out there? I don't want to reinvent the wheel and write a whole new manual when someone's already written one that's fabulous and working really well. Because I'm Caucasian, I'm not South American, I'm not going to be as culturally sensitive as someone who's from Bolivia writing a manual about Bolivians. And then sustainability, and that's not just of expeditions, but of projects too. This picture I love with the little girl wearing the funny glasses, mostly because it's, she's wearing funny eyeball glasses, which I think is pretty hilarious. But is that the legacy that we're leaving? I don't see any problem with leaving, with having fun and playing with these people and sharing our culture. But I don't want to be leaving the legacy of silly eyeball glasses when I'm trying to leave a legacy of so much more. And so I want to make sure that sending North Americans, that sending interns, that sending expeditions isn't something that is creating more problems than it's solving. All right, that's it. That's all I got. Those are what we're thinking about. What?
Oh, I just take some clap for you.
Yes, okay. Thank you so much, Holly. Thank you.
If you have any solutions or suggestions or questions about what they're thinking about.
Yeah,
Yes.
I have questions about curriculum. Generally, where are your classes taught? Do you teach them in a formal setting? Like, do you go in a school and invite 30 or 40 members of the community to come and take part in a weekly or daily class? Or are they more taught on families or groups? Just generally, how are these groups?
The majority of them are taught in a formal setting, but that formal setting is sort of a vague definition of a formal setting because in Ethiopia it's underneath a tree very often. In South America there are generally schoolrooms or there's a soccer field where they meet, and they meet normally once or twice a week, and it generally is a group of people who have been invited by the local government and have also, or have chosen themselves. Like we start women's groups very often. And what the government will say, well, we think these 4 women should be in the group, and then they'll invite their friends, and then it will grow to like 15 or 20. So that's how they are taught in a formal setting.
And by government, you mean that local
Yes,
village
the
government.
local little village government.
What purpose do you see in the expeditions? Why does Ascend do these expeditions? What is their reasoning?
That's a great question. And we actually made a list once that we give out to all of our expedition participants, which is like 20 long, and I'm not going to remember all 20. But I'll tell you the couple of them that I remember off the top of my head and that I have seen happen. The first is that this is a cultural sharing experience. We have, my boss has been doing this she's been working in nonprofit work and working with Ascend or Engage Now since almost the very beginning, so like for the past 25 years. And she has kids who grew up watching her do this. And she lives in a very nice neighborhood in Salt Lake City. And when her son was about 9 years old, they went on an expedition to Ethiopia. Their whole family went. And Ben, who is this boy's name, before they left, he'd been talking a little bit about that their house wasn't quite nice enough. And why didn't they get a swimming pool like the neighbors had? And Carolyn has her house is very nice, but it's not as nice as her neighbor's house. Like she lives in a neighborhood that has really beautiful and sort of outlandish homes. And Ben went on this expedition to Ethiopia with his whole family, and he came home, and he ran into the bathroom and he flushed the toilet. And he ran back out and he said, "Mom, we have a great house." And I think that that's the kind of thing it can do for children and students. Internships, I really believe, change students' lives. I think they change the course. I think that we are doing our best to create citizens who care about other people. And I think that's what expeditions do. I think that they have this great cultural effect that they help people care about other people. The second thing that they do is that they provide a motivation that we have found no other way to provide in the communities where we work. When you go to a community 6 months ahead of time and you say, we would like, or you come up with this plan to build a school and you announce to the community, we're going to bring 30 North Americans who want to help you with your work. The community suddenly, it becomes an urgent thing that they want to take care of. And they get so excited about these other people who are excited and who care about them. And I think that in our video, there's this really cheesy line where one of the people who went on an expedition kind of looks at the camera and he says, I think the best thing we provided was hope for these people, right? And that sounds so cheesy, but in a way it's kind of true. They get excited that people care about them, and they want to show off what they've done, and it's a validating experience for the people in the communities. So those are the two biggest reasons, but we do have a list of like 30 others of why we do them. Any other questions? Yeah.
With your expeditions, are they usually large organized groups that get together themselves, or is it just kind of random students and people that come to you and then get together?
It's a little bit of both. Most of our expeditions actually start out, we have an expedition leader, so someone who typically has been to the country before or who has a vested interest in it, and the expedition leader normally takes their family and then one of their friends wants to go too with their family. So you have like 2 families, typically between 5 and 7 people per family, and then you get like a couple of college students who want to go and a couple of people from this and this and this who want to go, or a young couple, so it's a little bit of both, but they're all organized and run through our organization. So like people don't have to worry about finding hotels and getting transportation. We take care of all of the travel arranging. Yeah.
Have you seen fundraising for your organization change at all since the recession?
It's not officially a recession until we've had 2 quarters of negative economic downturn. We've only had 1. I know that it is something that we are a little bit worried about and that we're certainly thinking about. We recently had our major fundraiser of the year, and we didn't see any growth from last year, but we met the same numbers we did last year, which we were thrilled about. We thought that was amazing. But we have recently been sort of talking about how we're going to change and grow as we become more creative working in a different economy. One of the things we do find, though, is that really rich people don't really care about what's happening in the stock market. Like, that sounds so horrible, but Warren Buffett's not really panicked right now, right? I mean, he's thinking that things are going along pretty smooth. And he's probably investing in the market right now. And so there is sort of a class of people who, not that they're above an economic turndown, because they're not, but they are still able to provide and to, like, there's still enough money to go around. Other questions? Yeah.
How could we better train our students to be good leaders?
Joan, do you want to answer that question?
We need some help from you.
Okay.
I'm glad you asked that.
You have your ideal, well, they have to be flexible, but what are some of the kinds of things you wish they learned in college they were going to be interested in?
What's interesting is that, I have to tell you right now, I come from sort of a hippie family. Like, holding hands and singing Kumbaya is not unheard of at my house, okay? So, and the best part is my mom's in education. So, like, we talk about the ways people learn and all that kind of stuff all the time. And so, I'm just going to tell, and I'll illustrate that by telling you that for years my mom said, honey, I don't care what you graduated in college. People don't care what your major is. All they want to know is that you learned how to learn. And that is actually the biggest bonus or the biggest advantage that an intern can have. If they can keep that flexibility, if they can have, this is totally a cliche, but that go-to attitude, the idea of, I don't want to have an intern come back to me and say, sorry, we can't do this. This isn't working. I want them to come back to me and say, this isn't working, but we've thought about it and we think we know what will work. So sort of the initiative, and that's tricky because we also want them to stay culturally sensitive. We don't want them to try to boss anyone around in the office because they are only there for a short time. But we do want them, that is something that the American culture, I think it's one of our greatest strengths, that we are taught from the time we are young that you can do whatever you want if you put your mind to it. Because that is not what is taught in many of the countries where development is happening. These people are taught from the time that they are young that where you are is where you are. And so if people can sort of instill that motivation and that go-to, that initiative, and then the flexibility, those are the things that are most valuable to me. I can teach them what they need to know about building a latrine. I can teach them what they need to know about dressing appropriately in front of a class and presenting a class in Spanish and those kinds of things. Like, those things are easy to teach. It's hard to teach this attitude of really wanting to be there and of really wanting to make a difference and of being willing to listen to what other people have to say and come back with solutions that change and that can help us grow and progress. Was that kind of too roundabout? Sorry.
We're not designed to teach that.
Dang it.
We hope they learn it on their internship.
Oh, so we're in a catch-22.
We sent them out to learn that piece.
Yeah.
Yeah, because one of the things we're trying to do is more, like sociology is looking at teaching evaluation skills, or, and we've had conversations about learning curriculum skills or different kinds of things. That's an ongoing. So I think we're probably, for people who've got classes and whatever, we're at our closing time. Anyone who'd like to stay and talk longer, you're welcome to do it, and thank you for coming. And